Well, hello everyone. Good to have you all in the company of yours truly, and welcome back to the Coach's Corner. This is, of course, another tennis show, and we will be talking about the Australian Open 2023 semi-finals, which have been completed. And of course, Saturday and Sunday we'll see the finals being played. There have been a few finals that have already been played, but the weekend will, of course, be the glorious conclusion to what has been, in many ways, a remarkable tournament. And we will possibly hope to try and bring you ball by ball coverage of the women's final tomorrow and maybe the men's final if we do get time. And we will hope to make sure that we do a good job on that. But now, of course, we have to talk about the semi-finals and other issues. And I am delighted to be welcoming a sports guy who speaks a great deal of sense and who I always enjoy talking sports with.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that more than, congratulatory welcome, which, I feel humbled by, but it's good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to be here with you. And obviously, every time you and I get together, we do more than just chew the fat. We reflect, we analyze, we talk about a lot of things. And of course, we we basically make sure that we talk about where we try to get to the issues and have a good time here. And I know that time is short, and I will make this worth your time. I promise you. So the first topic, of course, on the agenda is the men's singles semi-final, of course, the semi-finals, I should say, because we already know what happened. Djokovic was able to beat his semi-final opponent, and we've got the here, 9-time champion Novak Djokovic steamrolling his opponent, beating Tommy Paul to set up an Aussie Open final against the Greek Stefanos Tsitsipas. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. I mean, spelling it shouldn't be an issue. Djokovic, 35 years old, overcoming another wobble in the opening set. And bear in mind that he came into the tournament with a hamstring injury. But ever since his first few matches, he's gotten better. He's obviously been playing with the same dominance that he usually does. And another straight sets win. A slight wobble in the first set, as mentioned, but straightforward 2 sets afterwards. And the Greek Tsitsipas has a chance to land his first Grand Slam title after beating his Russian opponent, Karen Khachanov, winning in 4 sets, losing the third set on a tight tiebreak, but winning the fourth and seeing it through. And 18 seed Khachanov, of course, saved 2 match points in the third set tiebreak. Basically, so this is sort of what's going to be going on. I don't want to go too much further. Now, we're going to talk about both opponents, you and I, and that's another reason why I'm really happy to have you here, because when you take a look at Djokovic, for instance, obviously there's a lot of, there's no denying his talent. In my opinion, by the time he ends his professional career, he will go down as the greatest of all time, because unlike the now retired Roger Federer and the completely crocked Rafa Nadal,
debilitating.
Djokovic still looks exceptionally fit. I always say, though, that he is his own worst enemy at times. I firmly believe that he was rightly expelled from the tournament last year for failing to comply with the regulations of the country, especially when protecting themselves against the pandemic was a big responsibility. And we all know that his attitude at times has gotten him in trouble. Some of us will remember how he whacked a ball girl at the US Open and ended up being dismissed from his match. But I think age has sort of mellowed him down a little bit, and obviously with the injury as well, it very nearly hampered him in the opening rounds, but he seems to have overcome it. I'm reminded of Andre Agassi in 1999 winning the French Open with a shoulder injury. I don't know if you've had the chance to watch much of the action, because obviously the action starts very early back in the UK. But from what you've read of Djokovic, how impressed have you been with the way he's handled everything with regard to the injury and also some issues off the court, and also everything that's gone with it? What do you think of Djokovic in this tournament? I mean, would you say that it's been one of his best ever tournaments despite the circumstances?
I wouldn't say it's been one of his best ever tournaments. I'd say if we're talking one of his best ever tournaments, we're looking at 2015 probably. But this tournament, he has, as Manny has mentioned, just gone about his business. He has shown why he is probably going to go down as the greatest of all time when it comes to the numbers, when it comes to Grand Slams. We all know he's chasing number 22. I mean, Manny kind of alluded to it in this game. There was a wobble in the first set. I think he was 5-1 up. I caught the first set, and I think He ended up, Tommy Paul, he got to 5-5, and you're thinking, normally Djokovic, mentality monster, he'll see it out. But he had a bit of a wobble in that first set, as Manny said. And then, yeah, business as usual. Djokovic, him at the Australian Open, unbelievable. When it comes to finals, he's 9-0. I strongly believe it'll be 10-0. And I'm sorry, but when it comes, like I said, to Australian Open, this is his territory. He will always do well in this slam, regardless of what's been going off court. Manny alluded to it last year. He had the vaccine issue this year. There's been the whole thing of, will he be received, welcomed like he has been previously? And then, of course, off the field with his father as well. He's had his issues as well. But listen, Djokovic lets the tennis do his talking. And I truly believe that we will be seeing him win the 10th Australian Open of his career come Sunday.
Even with the hamstring injury, mind you, that meant that he wouldn't be able to train in the alternate days between his matches. So I think it's also a case of intelligence, namely that once you having played so many games before, you sort of have an idea how you ideally want to rest and recuperate, prepare for each match in between. You've got to strike that balance. And if training, if by training you run the risk of exacerbating that injury, it's just not worth it, I would say.
No, I think I agree. I mean, especially in that Australian heat as well, you do not want to be exerting yourself too much. So, I mean, we all know Djokovic is a fitness freak, but again, that hamstring, will it come to an issue in the final? I think it would have been if Djokovic had many 5-setters this tournament, but luckily with him, it's either been straight sets or he might have lost one set. But other than that, I think Djokovic will be fine come the final.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see the third and fourth seeds rise through to the final. But this particular tournament, and we might talk about the women as well, has seen so many seeds fall by the wayside. We already saw Nadal and Ruud getting out before the end of the second round, and so many more were just falling. Normally, as you will agree, and it's the heat and the conditions that make it very difficult. You've got to make sure that you're well conditioned, whether you're in the men's draw or the women's draw. And if you aren't able to get to grips with the conditioning and the, having to play a little bit late or what have you, you just it's not going to be easy for you or even possible. But I guess it's a case of the cream rising to the top at the end.
No, agreed. I think, you mentioned the conditions, which are tough for both the men and the women. I think another thing which has been circulating is the Breakpoint Netflix documentary. All the major stars that have featured in that show, funnily enough, didn't make it past the fourth round. I think Felix Auger-Aliassime was the only player that made it to the fourth round from that batch. So, I mean, I'm not really one to believe in superstition and all that sort of stuff and these sort of stats, but it is funny and ironic that everyone did feature, that had a major part in that show, didn't really do well.
Right.
But I do think, like you said, the cream rise to the top. This is Djokovic's playground as far as I'm concerned, at the Rod Laver Arena. So not shocked there. Tsitsipas, fair play. He's done well as well. So, you've got to give credit. And at the end of the day, they'll be both battling for the number one position in that final. So whoever wins will be the new world number one.
Yes, it could either be the Greek Tsitsipas or Djokovic himself who could be the number one. Big up to Bobby K. Thanks a lot for joining in. I mean, I don't know if you're going to be staying for the whole thing. And of course, Hanno's just mentioned that it is Djokovic versus the new Djokovic. And it's an interesting comment that he's made. I think with Tsitsipas, and we're going to talk briefly about him before we move on. Certainly, he's played some really good tennis throughout this tournament and hasn't shown too many signs of struggle himself. Although I believe, if memory serves me right, he has been taken to 5 sets once. And even here in the semi-final, he had a little bit of a wobble in the fourth set because Khachanov was obviously giving him a few problems. I think it's fair to say that the weight of expectation on him, given that he's representing his country and trying to put Greek tennis on the map, and also hasn't had the best record in Grand Slam finals, might possibly be weighing on him. He is up, of course, against the titan that is Djokovic. He has been, of course, vociferously backed by the Greek diaspora / Greek community in Australia. So there's a part of me that thinks that maybe when it comes to, having the game or the mentality to win, he might not quite have it. And I think you pretty much predicted that Djokovic might win. But do you think Tsitsipas will give Djokovic a good fight?
I mean, potentially. I mean, I remember watching the 2020 Roland Garros semi-final, actually, between Tsitsipas and Djokovic. Tsitsipas actually was 2 sets up, and we all know Djokovic came back from 2 sets down to win that game. And even then, I thought genuinely that Djokovic would have won that game, that final in straight sets. So, fair play to Tsitsipas. I think this time around, I think Tsitsipas will be more game. I think he knows what Djokovic offers in this final. The fact that, like I mentioned, he came back down from 2 sets down to win that game is definitely going to be playing on Tsitsipas's mind. I mean, Hanno mentioned that it's the old Djokovic, Djokovic versus the new Djokovic. I wouldn't say that is the case. I mean, let's be honest, Djokovic is probably the best returner of all time. He's such a complete player, and his ground coverage is insane. I don't think Tsitsipas has that. Tsitsipas does have that absolutely amazing one-handed backhand that is majestic to watch, but I just don't think that he'll have enough tools to punish Djokovic on this hard court. Like I said, I think Djokovic will win. I think it'll be 3-1, but Tsitsipas will be game in this final for sure.
Very true. You mentioned the one-handed backhand. Certainly shades of Roger Federer or even a Pete Sampras, except Federer and Sampras both had the tools to win more majors, I would say. And we now go to the women. It's one Belarusian down and one more to go for the Wimbledon champion, Elena Rybakina. And I'm just going to share this page as well. Yep. So, the Wimbledon champion Rybakina from Kazakhstan has another shot at a major title after reaching the final, and she will meet Belarusian fifth seed Arina Sabalenka. Rybakina actually beat the other Belarusian, two-time former champion Victoria Azarenka, and she was playing in her semi-final 10 years after her last title triumph, whereas the other Belarusian beat Poland's Magda Linette, 30-year-old, proving that life begins at 30 sometimes. And both victories were straight sets wins. First set's going to a tiebreak, with the second sets being a little bit more straightforward. And it was effectively a case of Sabalenka, the heavy favorite, coming through. And Azarenka obviously gave her best and obviously provided some happiness for the older generation. But I think Rybakina, the youngest player in the draw, up and coming. And so Rybakina was seeded 22nd and Sabalenka was seeded 5th. So this is also a tournament where we've seen two big seeds going out. It was Swiatek and Jabeur and a few others going out. And I believe the third and the fourth seeds, Pegula and Garcia, didn't go too much further. So here as well in the tournament, in the women's tournament, we've seen seeds falling by the wayside. But we also get to see so many more layers in the women's tournament. I mean, so many wonderful young women coming through, but a lot more older players coming to the fore and really proving that there is still life in them. Azarenka being one and Linette being another one. So, I mean, obviously, when it comes to the storylines that have been involved over here, I think this women's tournament has been nothing short of amazing. But how impressed have you been with the two finalists?
Oh, I've been very, very impressed thus far. I mean, so far, Sabalenka is so good on her ground strokes. And she's hit 196 winners, which is incredible. I mean, Rybinka, she's got 45 aces so far. Crazy. You can see how these two are very, very powerful players. I mean, if we're looking at Rybinka just alone, she's beaten Iga Swiatek, who's obviously world number one. She beat Jelena Ostapenko, who I think won the French Open, the 2017 final. Then you've got Danielle Collins as well, who was runner-up a couple of years ago in the Australian Open. Like that's a pretty good run to the final, you know. And then if you look at, and then obviously we know she beat Azarenka, who's obviously a wily old veteran who knows what she's all about. And then if we look at Sabalenka on the other hand, she's beaten Bencic, Vekic, Linette. It's a pretty good run to the final, and she hasn't even dropped a set. So you can tell it's going to be two women who are right at the top of their game, who will not let anything go. It's going to be a powerful game in terms of the ground strokes and the rallies. Whoever serves the best, I think, will win this game. The serve is going to be massive. And whoever can limit themselves to the least amount of unforced errors, I think it's going to be a cracking game. Been impressed with both of them. And the future of the women's game looks really strong, which is great to see, especially in the post-Serena Williams era.
It is great to see. And you mentioned the unforced errors. I think it's been quite fair to say that certainly in the early rounds, with players still struggling to get to grips with the conditions, unforced errors have always been a problem. And it could very well be that whoever makes the least unforced errors out of these two players will probably end up going on to win. As you mentioned, both of these players are quite powerful. Rybakina with her serve and Sabalenka with her ground strokes. So this could very well be a matchup reminiscent of... I wouldn't necessarily say Serena Williams and Maria Sharapova at their peak, but maybe something similar. And it could very well be, obviously, with the match being played in the evening at 7:30 local time, if I'm not wrong, over in Melbourne. I don't know if it's going to be 7:30 or 6:30, maybe because of the time difference. I'm not too sure. I'll have to look that up. But it might be a little bit better in some ways. Obviously, with matches being played in the peak heat, they've had to have the heat delays. But it's good that there have been no backlogs and that the scheduling has worked out well. But back to the players in question. Obviously, there's a lot of backstory with regard to both of these players, and Rybakina, as we all know, was the is the defending Wimbledon champion,
Mm.
but she was never really able to enjoy her win as such, because as we all know, the L it was the LTA and the ATP had docked Wimbledon of their ranking points following their decision to bar Russian and Belarusian players from playing. So because she couldn't earn the points, she seems to she was never really able to feel like a champion. So maybe if she wins tomorrow, she'll have that feeling. And she says it there. Everything was new at Wimbledon. Nervous no matter what because of the final, but now I more or less understand what to expect. And we're going to see here. This is just a reminder of what she's done. Only one three-set match, as you mentioned, against
Mm.
Collins, losing the tiebreak in the second, but bouncing back impressively. And of course, beating Swiatek, Ostapenko, and Azarenka, Swiatek, of course, is the world number one, and Ostapenko and Azarenka, former Grand Slam champions, and certainly unheralded Wimbledon champion. But she even had to begin her tournament on a small outside court, but she was able to make it thus far. And she now stands one match away from winning a second major. And of
Mm.
course, as you mentioned, 45 aces for Rybakina and
Oof,
196 winners
unbelievable.
for Sabalenka. Sabalenka's run has been a little bit more straightforward. In only two sets was she taken to 7 games, one set being a tiebreaker. And then she had lost all of her previous 3 Grand Slam finals. So it could very well be that she ends up, like Sipit says, a slight underdog in some ways,
Mm.
but the favorite in others. And we're going to discuss that further. She was, of course, long tipped to win a Grand Slam title, but crumbled in key pressure moments. But she's been able to take control of her emotions both on and off the court, and that has led to her improved form and speaking to her psychologist and so forth. And here we talk about the head-to-head record between the both of them. Sabalenka's won all 3 of their games and has won 11 titles to Rybakina's 3, but Rybakina has the sole Grand Slam. So it's hard to talk about, who could necessarily be the favorite over here because, both of these players have played unbelievable tennis. I suppose, going by the book, you'd say that the highest seeded Sabalenka would be the favorite, given her head-to-head record and her greater career titles. But with Rybakina having won her Grand Slam and Sabalenka not having won one yet, could it be that the pressure might again get to her, or do you think that Sabalenka might end up, overcoming Rybakina with her newfound strength?
I think Sabalenka wins this. I truly believe so. I mean, she won the Australian Open doubles title a couple of years ago as well. I think she has a bit more know-how at the Australian Open. I think this is a time she's been due a Grand Slam for a while. She's always been getting to the deep stages. I'm pretty sure she made the Wimbledon semi-finals a couple of years ago, and she lost to Pliskova. So she's there or thereabouts. It's her first final. Will the nerves get to her? Potentially, like you mentioned. I think she'll have too much for Rybakina. I think Sabalenka has been absolutely phenomenal this tournament. I think she'll have enough to get over the line. But again, it depends. I mean, if we look at her record, she's lost all of her previous Grand Slam semi-finals. Even at the US Open, she's lost there. So that's hardcore, of course, like the Australian Open. But I just think, so far this season, she's not dropped a set this year. She's won all 10 of her matches. She's clinched the Adelaide International Warm-Up event. She has been playing phenomenal. I think she is the woman to beat in this final.
Yeah, so basically, you've just sort of answered this question: what can we expect in the finals? I think from all 4 finalists, we should expect a lot of powerful tennis.
Hmm.
Certainly from players who have fine ground strokes, good ground coverage, as you've said. It almost might be hard to tell both sets of finalists apart in some ways, except maybe in Djokovic's case, I suppose he probably has a little bit more heft and natural power to his game, whereas Tsitsipas needs to, run quite a bit. And with Sabalenka and Rybakina, it could very well be that Sabalenka has slightly more of the power, but Rybakina is certainly not one to be messed with. So I think you pretty much dealt with that. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think it's going to be an absolute phenomenal final. And may the best man in the men's final and may the best woman in the women's final win.
Yeah, well, speaking of finals, we are going to talk about, just very briefly, I'm just going to mention that Sania Mirza in her final major, she lost her mixed doubles final in the company of Rohan Bopanna. It was a straight sets loss to the hold on a minute. Yeah, a straight sets loss to the Brazilian pair Luisa Stefani and Rafael Matos, who beat them 7-6, 6-2. And she had been hoping to, of course, crown her final appearance with a title, but sadly wasn't able to do so. But a runner-up position is certainly not small potatoes. She's been arguably India's greatest women's player and has certainly left her legacy. And it's hoped that more and more women in India will start to play tennis and maybe follow in her footsteps. And in happier news, this is another final that was completed. The disability doubles final was won by the British duo of Alfie Hewitt and Gordon Reid. I believe it's their 15th title. Some people say it's their 16th. I'm not too sure. But certainly proving that these two have been the best doubles combination for quite some time, and they will continue to do so. Hewitt, of course, will be coming up against a 16-year-old teenager for the disabled singles final, and it is hoped that he will try and win. Yep, he will be coming up against. He'll be coming up against the Japanese teenager Oda, 16 years old. And Hewitt's 6 major titles have really only been split between the French Open and US Open. But hopefully, if he wins the Aussie Open, it can start to open the floodgates. And we've got one more topic to discuss. Now, of course, as with the World Cup in Qatar, we've seen politics and sports mixing in some ways. And, in some ways, the controversy in the earlier rounds was able to, be muted a little bit as the tournament went ahead. You all know about that. And, of course, we've seen it rear its head again with the decision from the governing body, Tennis Australia, I believe, to ban the waving of Russian and Belarusian flags in the tournament. And, the controversy that Novak Djokovic's dad found himself in, where he was photographed with a few people waving the Russian flag. To me, that was just a tempest in the teapot. It was just a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time more than anything else. But clearly, when the decision was made to not have the flags in the tournament, it was I think that the thing which really angered me, Sani, was that eventually they ended up backtracking and saying you are welcome to bring your flags as long as you don't create a nuisance. But in the end, we saw early in the tournament a few people waving those flags were making idiots of themselves, and they were rightly ejected from the stadium and had their flags confiscated. So when you make a rule like that, you obviously have to stick to it. But I suppose my question is, again, continuing off the Wimbledon tournament, having their points deducted for their decision to ban players from both Russia and Belarusia. What is your opinion on this? Do you really believe that sports and politics should never be allowed to mix? Because to me, sadly, when you're a sportsman, you're in the public eye, and it's being broadcasted to millions around the world. You can't help but see sports and politics mixing in a way. And what do you think of the decision to ban these flags?
Yeah, I think it's a very tricky one. I mean, as you know, on my page, I always keep it apolitical, don't really get involved in this sort of stuff. But speaking from, someone from the outside, I've always said that, sport can be used for a greater good. Now, if people use that as a greater good to, showcase and provide to the world what they truly believe in terms of, let's say, human rights and, fair play. I think on the topic of tennis, I personally didn't agree with, the players last year. I think it was last year, Wimbledon, the Russian and the Belarusian players being basically banned from Wimbledon. I didn't really agree with that. And I think rightfully so, the ATP and the LTA, they got rid of the ranking points from Wimbledon because I just didn't think that was right. if we're looking at, the Australian Open with the flags, agreed. I think if you're making a nuisance of yourself with any flag, you should be removed. Like, let's be honest with you, that's just not on. At the end of the day, you're going to there to watch tennis. You're not there to wave a flag. But on the same front, I don't think that the flags of these countries should be banned. They're still flags. They're still, people's nations. For example, Daniel Medvedev, Belarusia. We've got Sabalenka. What's to say? Let's say Sabalenka wins the final. What's wrong with the Belarusian flag being, waved in the flag? That's. I don't see how that's an issue. But again, inevitably, sports and politics will always, mix. We've seen that since, let's say, the 30s, especially when the Munich Olympics took place in Nazi Germany at that time. Ever since then, it's always been a thing, sports and politics, and inevitably it will always mix. And unfortunately, especially for me, for someone that would love to keep them separate, it will never be the case.
Exactly. It just can't really be the case. I mean, I'm personally am happy with the decision because we all know, we all see it in the news about the Russia-Ukraine war, and we all know basically who which side is right and which side is wrong, and we all know which country will be on the wrong side of history. I'm not going to go too further into that. As far as banning players is concerned, I do agree with you because for what it's worth, players cannot really control which country they are born in. Although in Rybakina's case, she was born in Russia but chose to represent Kazakhstan because she believed she could get more money and funding from the Kazakhstan government, and that's proved to work out quite well for her. But again, you can't deny players a living. But obviously, there is the issue of human rights being considered, and that is something which has to be respected. And for people to just flout that and glorify Putin and his ways, it's as if you're trying to make yourselves reviled by the greater society. And I'm not going to get too deep into the Qatar issues because that's already over and done with, and we had our chance to have our say, and some of us already done so. But it's just a shame, really, that this could overshadow what has been a good tournament. And as you say, if Sabalenka goes on to win, she might not be allowed to raise her flag. I suppose she might have to console herself with the fact that she won her tournament and that you don't need to wave a flag to prove your patriotism, as it were.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think if she does win, great. At the end of the day, what's more important, her winning or flag being waved? Definitely her winning, especially if anyone's in her position. But it's always nice to pay homage to, what country you're representing. For example, I mean, obviously you mentioned Ryabinka. She obviously was born in Russia, but she represents Kazakhstan. Fair enough. Like, at the end of the day, that's cool. I think, there's players in the past that have always been born in another country. They represent, a different country. Happens in football a lot as well. At the end of the day, tennis will be the main talking point on Sunday, regardless of who wins or loses. And that is what we love to hear and see.
And that is the best way to end it. Thank you very much indeed. We will go through a couple of comments. Obviously, we got some big support for Tsitsipas here from Mr. Trollope himself. Hope he wins because he doesn't want to see Djokovic overtaking Nadal. Sadly, Hanno, I think that will happen sooner or later. We've got our Greek friend, Harry from Hasbro TV, obviously gunning for his countrymen. And Ryan, good to see you, mate. Thank you very much indeed for joining. Wonderful to know you're a big tennis fan. We might be doing a watch along for tomorrow's women's singles final. So if you would like to, if you are free and you would like to join us, I believe the game will be starting at 8:30 a.m. in the UK. So if you are in front of the telly and your PC and you want to just join and have a chin wag, by all means, mate, you are welcome. And we have another supporter for Tsitsipas, and I'm sure. I mean, hope is there, but in this case, hope and history might not write.
I think, as you can tell, Djokovic is definitely not everyone's biggest fan. He is kind of, tennis's villain per se, especially when it comes to the big three as well. But you cannot doubt Djokovic's greatness, what he brings.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever I play tennis, I model myself on Djokovic in terms of playing style. Listen, Nadal, Federer, legends of the game, not even denying it. They're the big reason why I got into tennis, to be honest. But Djokovic is a machine.
Yeah, I lived. I obviously grew up watching through the days of Becker during the autumn of his career, and then of course Andre Agassi, Pete Sampras, Michael Chang, and I saw Federer, Nadal, and Murray coming into their own. So wonderful. Hope to see you tuning in. Now, I know you had to leave, so I will let you go. But before you leave, you are not going to leave without shouting out your socials and telling us where we can find you.
Sure, yeah. Thank you everyone for tuning in. So the name Sani That Sports Guy on YouTube, it's the same, Sani That Sports Guy, vlogs, reels, predictions, all that sort of stuff. Likewise on Instagram, Sani_That Sports Guy. You'll see me there as well, doing reels, skits, references, predictions, reviews, vlogs, posts, whatever you could think of. Even on my stories, I put, let's say, who's going to win. I do polls. What I'm trying to say is, if you're interested, check them out. And as always, make sure to subscribe to Hannah's Coach's Corner. It's a great channel. Everything sport is here. So what else could you miss?
No, agreed. You couldn't really miss much else. And I want to thank you for coming on to talk with me. And I hope, as I've said before, that we get to have some more opportunities to do this again, because I think we always seem to bounce a lot off each other in a way that I hardly ever do. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've had some discussions with a lot of other people, but you can see the bouncing, you can see the chemistry, can't you?
Agreed. Likewise, it's been an absolute pleasure as always, Manny.
All right. So briefly, let me just say, tomorrow and Sunday will be the women's and men's singles finals. If you are watching, play will be starting from 8:30 in the morning in the UK, 10:30 in the morning in South Africa, afternoon time if you're watching in India, and it'll be at about 7:30 or so, 6:30 or 7:30 local time in Australia. Yeah, 7:30 in fact, because Melbourne's on the other side. Once again, subscribe to this channel. Do please like this video. Click the bell button for notifications. Don't hesitate to follow Hanno on Instagram, Hanno_Coach_Corner. Twitter, you can catch him at Hanno 70830030. Also, do please subscribe to Sani the Sports Guy. Follow him whenever you can. His reels are the real deal. It has to be said. Really enjoy them. And thanks a lot again for tuning in. I hope to see some of you all tomorrow and over the weekend. And you will see me again doing some more sports-related content on this channel. Big up to Hanno. Big up to everyone else. For now, though, from Sani and Manny, we are out.
Peace.